Every major car company on Earth is telling you the same story right now. Gas engines are finished. The future is a battery and a plug, and anyone who says otherwise is standing in the way of progress. And then there's Toyota, the company that literally invented the mass-market hybrid, quietly building an engine that runs on hydrogen, sounds like a sports car, and refuels in under 5 minutes. If this engine works the way Toyota says it will, it doesn't just compete with electric vehicles. It undercuts the entire argument for switching to them in the first place. So why would the world's largest automaker bet against a trillion-dollar industry trend that every government, every investor, and almost every competitor has already committed to? To understand that, you have to understand what Toyota thinks everyone else is getting wrong. Here's the pitch the rest of the industry has been selling for the last decade. Ban gas cars, force everyone into an EV, and the planet gets cleaner. It's a simple story, and it's an appealing one. California has committed to ending new gas car sales by 2035. The European Union set the same deadline. Canada and Australia aren't far behind. On paper, it sounds settled, but Toyota sells cars in more than 200 countries, not just California and Germany, but rural India, Southeast Asia, and parts of Africa and South America, where the power grid barely keeps the lights on reliably, let alone a fleet of EVs charging overnight. And Toyota's question is simple, almost uncomfortably simple. If you force the entire planet onto one timeline, what happens to the billions of people who live somewhere an EV literally cannot function yet? That's not a company being stubborn. That's a company that actually has to sell cars in those places. This isn't new behavior for Toyota either. In 1997, when hybrid cars sounded like a strange science project to most American buyers, Toyota launched the Prius anyway. Not because the market was asking for it, but because their engineers believed it was the right call. It became one of the most influential vehicles of the last 30 years. Toyota has a track record of being early and right when the rest of the industry thought they were being stubborn. So when former CEO Akio Toyoda started publicly pushing back on the all-EV timeline, people paid attention even when they disagreed with him. In 2021, Toyota refused to sign a global pledge to stop selling gas-powered cars by 2040. The backlash was immediate. Environmental groups called for boycotts, and Western media painted Toyota as the industry holdout standing in the way of progress. Toyota didn't walk it back. Instead, they started laying out in detail exactly what they thought the rest of the industry was ignoring. And some of those problems are hard to argue with once you actually look at the numbers. Start with electricity itself. Every EV needs power from somewhere, and if EVs become the dominant vehicle type by the mid-2030s, some energy analysts estimate the US alone would need to grow its electricity generation by roughly 40% just to keep up with charging demand. That's not a hypothetical. It's the kind of infrastructure build-out that takes a decade or more. In California, the state leading the EV push already deals with rolling blackouts during peak summer demand. Now stack tens of millions of EVs charging on top of that grid. And here's the part almost nobody puts in the pitch deck. A huge share of the world's electricity still comes from coal and natural gas. An EV has zero emissions at the tailpipe, but the power plant charging it doesn't disappear. In a lot of countries, the total emissions footprint of clean EV charging is a lot murkier than the marketing suggests. Then there's the battery itself. And this is where things get genuinely uncomfortable. Lithium mining is concentrated in Chile, Argentina, and Australia, and it consumes enormous amounts of water in regions that are already short on it. Cobalt, another critical battery material, is mostly mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where reporting has repeatedly raised concerns about child labor and dangerous conditions in parts of the supply chain. And when those batteries eventually die, usually somewhere between 8 and 15 years, there's barely an industrial recycling system built to handle them at scale yet. If hundreds of millions of EV batteries retire over the next 2 decades, that's a waste. Problem nobody's fully solved. Add in the price gap. New EVs in the US still average well above what a comparable gas car costs, and the charging time gap. A home charger can take anywhere from 8 to 40 hours for a full charge versus a 5-minute gas station stop. And you start to see the exact list of problems Toyota has been pointing at for years, while most of the industry stayed focused on the good headlines. Which brings us to the actual engine. Toyota's answer isn't a battery at all. It's a combustion engine, the same basic idea that's powered cars for over a century, except it burns hydrogen instead of gasoline. And the logic behind it is almost stupidly simple once you hear it. The combustion engine was never really the problem. Gasoline was the problem. Swap the fuel for something that doesn't produce carbon dioxide when it burns. And you keep everything drivers already like about a real engine. The sound, the throttle response, the mechanical feel, while cutting out the tailpipe emissions entirely. When hydrogen burns, the byproduct is water. Not CO2, not soot, not the particulate mess that comes out of a diesel, just water vapor. This isn't a concept sitting in a lab somewhere either. Toyota has run hydrogen-burning versions of the Corolla Cross and the GR Yaris in actual endurance races in Japan. Not hydrogen fuel cell cars like the Mirai, which convert hydrogen to electricity, but engines that genuinely burn hydrogen the way a normal engine burns gas. Getting there wasn't simple. Hydrogen burns hotter and faster than gasoline, so the pistons, valves, and cylinder head all needed serious reinforcement. The fuel system had to be rebuilt from scratch because hydrogen is a gas, not a liquid, and the ignition timing had to be recalibrated almost from zero. Toyota says they've worked through it, and what's left is something that drives like a normal gas car, but doesn't put carbon out the back, and the practical advantages, if this holds up outside of controlled testing, are hard to ignore. Refueling takes minutes, not hours. Toyota's cited figures put it between 90 seconds and 5 minutes, essentially the same as a gas station stop. There's no meaningful range anxiety once the tank's full. Hydrogen engines don't lose a chunk of their performance in freezing temperatures the way lithium-ion batteries do, which report range drops of 20 to 40% in cold winters. There's no 600-plus kilogram battery pack dragging the car's weight down. And because it's still fundamentally a combustion engine, a normal mechanic can be trained to service it. You don't need to rebuild an entire specialized repair industry around it the way EVs require. Now, before this turns into a Toyota commercial, let's be honest about the other side of this because it's a big one. Infrastructure is where hydrogen falls apart right now, and Toyota knows it. The U.S. has roughly 160,000 public EV charging stations, and that number is growing fast with billions in government and private investment behind it. Hydrogen refueling stations, around 60 in the entire country, and almost all of them are in California. You can't sell hydrogen cars in Texas or Ohio if there's nowhere to fill them up, and nobody's going to build a hydrogen station where there aren't any hydrogen cars yet. That's a real chicken and egg problem, and so far, EVs have solved it far more successfully than hydrogen has. Building hydrogen infrastructure is also expensive. Hydrogen has to be stored at extremely high pressure or extremely low temperature, and that equipment isn't cheap. A hydrogen station can cost millions to build versus tens of thousands for an EV charger. And here's the uncomfortable part for Toyota's clean energy pitch. Most commercial hydrogen today is still produced from natural gas, a process that creates real carbon emissions of its own. Genuinely green hydrogen made from renewable electricity exists. It's just small scale and expensive right now. Until that changes, hydrogen isn't quite the perfectly clean fuel Toyota markets it as. And on cost, hydrogen currently runs around $12 per kilogram in the US, meaning a full tank can cost $60 to $80, roughly gas price territory, and considerably more than charging an EV at home. So no, Toyota has never actually claimed hydrogen replaces the EV. That's the part people miss. The real strategy is bigger and a lot less dramatic than hydrogen kills EVs. Toyota is still building battery EVs. They're investing heavily in solid-state batteries, the next generation of battery tech that could charge faster and hold more energy than today's lithium-ion packs, with Toyota targeting a production vehicle using the technology in the next few years. They're also doubling down on hybrids because hybrids don't need any charging infrastructure at all, which makes them the realistic option in a huge portion of the world right now, not a stopgap. And hydrogen specifically is being aimed at the one place batteries genuinely struggle: heavy-duty trucking. A semi-truck hauling freight across a country doesn't have room for a battery pack big enough to go the distance without adding punishing weight and multi-hour charging stops. Hydrogen fuel cell trucks and buses can refuel in minutes and run for hundreds of miles, much closer to how diesel fleets operate today. Japan, Germany, and South Korea are already building hydrogen corridors along major freight routes, and California and Japan are running hydrogen buses in actual commercial service right now, not pilot programs on paper. So Toyota isn't betting everything on one technology. They're spreading the bet. Batteries for cities with strong charging networks, hybrids for markets that can't support charging infrastructure yet, hydrogen for heavy transport and driving enthusiasts who want the feel of a real engine without the emissions. History backs that kind of bet more often than people expect. Gasoline didn't kill diesel. Planes didn't kill trains. Different technologies tend to find their own lanes instead of one wiping out everything else. Right now, Tesla's still the biggest EV company by value, but BYD has actually passed them in global EV sales, a shift a lot of people slept on. Meanwhile, Toyota remains the largest automaker on Earth by total volume, and its hybrids are selling better than ever, which gives them the cash to keep funding hydrogen and solid-state research without betting the company on either one. The real risk for Toyota is if EV adoption and battery tech improve faster than they're planning for. Solid-state breakthroughs, cheaper batteries, better charging infrastructure, while competitors who went all in on EVs early lock up the market. But if the transition turns out to be slower and messier than governments have promised, if the grid strain and supply chain problems Toyota's been flagging keep showing up in the headlines, Toyota may end up being the company that gets to say they saw it coming. Here's what to actually watch. Whether Toyota gets a solid-state battery vehicle to market before its rivals, whether hydrogen infrastructure in Japan, Germany, and South Korea grows past pilot projects into something real, and how EVs perform for regular people in the situations that don't make it into commercials, cold winters, rural areas, apartment dwellers with nowhere to plug in overnight. There's no clean, obvious winner here yet. Toyota might be right that no single timeline works for the entire planet. They might also be underestimating how fast battery costs keep falling. Hydrogen has a real case in heavy transport, but the infrastructure gap is not a small problem. What actually matters isn't picking a side. It's whether the industry is willing to answer the questions Toyota keeps asking instead of just outrunning them.